Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm joined now by Alex Stewart.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, we talked about your team today, Alex, Southampton Football Club.
Correct.
Yes, that took you a long time to get involved there. We were also joined by Carl Anka, the Athletics Southampton correspondent, who was filled with wonderful little facts about the club that we are discussing. What did we talk about, Alex? Bullet points, please.
We talked about ownership, we talked about recruitment, we talked about the centrality of Ralph Hasenhuttl, we talked about how James Ward-Prowse is nice and...
would make a good son-in-law.
Not very edgy. Well, I was trying to avoid saying that to not give away the...
No, that's a good bit. That'll get people excited. According to Claude Puel, a good son-in-law.
And then Carl had various digs at me about esoteric signings and philosophy.
Yeah, also, surprised by the lack of Premier League talent in the academy at Southampton. I don't mean the players in the academy, I mean the coaching staff. Very interesting.
Yeah, that was
Carl talks about that too. Hey, listen, we cover it all. It's actually a really good episode, this one. I very much enjoyed that. And going into it thinking, I don't care about Southampton. I've left thinking, I do care because it's interesting. Have I said interesting too many times?
You care more than you did.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Anyway,
which may still not be very much.
If you would like to care more about something than you thought you cared about it before, then you should try The Athletic. If you go to theathletic.com/Tifo, you can get what I believe is a 30-day free trial. It could be a 90-day free trial. It could be a 30-day free trial. It's one or the other. I think it's a 30-day. And do you know what? Whatever you see, that's what everyone else is seeing. So don't worry. It's not like it's a special thing. But you should do that because the quality of the writing is exceptionally good. Every Premier League club is covered. 5 of the Championship clubs are. The top 2 Scottish clubs are. And of course, there are 9 other sports. Yes, that's true. There are other sports in the world. 9 of them are covered by The Athletic, including things like motorsports. I just deliberately picked a random niche one that won't apply to most of you. But, you know, the big American sports, basketball, American football, if you have a sort of over-the-Atlantic club, or if you are from over the Atlantic, hello, welcome, there's a lot for you to do. So if you go to theathletic.com/Tifo, you can not only enjoy yourself on a daily basis, but you can also make me enjoy my day by looking at you as a number in the back end of a WordPress login. Yeah? Yeah? Anyway, with no more further ado, we leave you in the safe and warm hands of Carl Anka. Carl, Southampton famously lost 9-0 this season, and for many people, or many observers, that appeared to be a bit of a turning point in the season. Results improved in the aftermath of that. You don't quite think that's where the turning point was, do you? Can you tell us where you think that turning point was? And also, let's revisit that 9-0. Just what happened?
The 9-0 is what happens when everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. It was a public embarrassment in a way I've not properly seen before. I saw fans leaving at 3-0. Which was at the half hour mark, and I saw like a large scale evacuation of St Mary's at half time, which is when it was 5-0. I outlined it in a piece afterwards of just simply what happened there is simply the case of Southampton playing very timid football against the Leicester City side, who were absolutely rampant at the start of the season. Bear in mind they also beat Newcastle 5-0. You look at how that Leicester City team play, and how Brendan Rodgers likes to set up teams. He likes creating teams that, will find a weak point in a defence and then exploit that repeatedly. And in that game, what they found was after Ryan Bertrand got sent off after the first goal, they found a very shaky Jan Valery operating at left back or left wing back, and just decided to run at him again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and that just created these huge attacking opportunities of which they wouldn't stop. So you bear in mind quite a few teams in the Premier League, Liverpool, Manchester City, for example, when they're 3 or 4 goals up, they will more or less stop playing football. One thing you can look into Liverpool is basically their running totals in the last half hour of games, or in like the 15 minutes after the start of the second half. They basically don't play football. They just sort of go, we're going to play 60 games this season, so rather than rotate our best players, we just sort of stroll about the pitch or not. Leicester don't do that. Leicester play full throttle football over and over and over again. In the aftermath of that game, apparently Johnny Evans told the rest of the Leicester City players that the record was on, and they went off and chased it because Leicester want to set records and play Champions League football. So that's what happened there. And I think that Leicester City result, put Southampton on a massive microscope and put so many of their long-term problems on full view in front of everyone. Bear in mind, Southampton are one of the least televised clubs in Premier League at the moment. Last season, only 8 of their games were televised. That was tied with Bournemouth. You don't really see Southampton on TV that much. They're normally penultimate or last on match of day as well. So there's quite a lot of football fans that only really look at Southampton or only really have memories of Southampton from the Koeman era or the good point of the Koeman era, or the last days 5 or 6 years ago. So I think the 9-0 was shocking, one, because of the scoreline, and also everyone's sort of like, wait, I haven't been paying attention for Southampton for so long. Why are they that bad? And what happened in the aftermath is Southampton played 2 games against Manchester City. One of them was they just sort of laid in the fetal position for 90 minutes in the Carabao Cup, while Manchester City just sort of tried beating them up but couldn't because they refused to move. Then there was a possible stabilizing defeat against City afterwards, and then there was a game against Everton, which I think is the worst game of football I've watched in the Premier League this season.
Right. For what reason?
It was Marco Silva's Everton, which was just a hodgepodge of academic ideas and physical ineptitude. And just atrocious set piece marking. So it was a tired and confident shot Southampton side begging an opponent not to beat them up properly, and Everton being too poorly coached to beat them up. Notably, before that game, Southampton gave home fans free scarves with "We March On" it, and after the game, Southampton Football Club historian Duncan Holly told me it was quite nice. The club gave us free blindfolds. Such was so sort of. I don't think so. The 9-0 absolutely highlighted a lot of long-term problems for Southampton, but Southampton played a lot worse. Well, played worse after the 9-0, in my opinion, and they only really truly began their rebirth after the second international break. And I think it was that international break, that pause, that allowed Hasenhuttl to get everyone in the room and go, right, this isn't working. We're going to get relegated if we keep doing this. What can I do to fix it? So if you can accept a period of time when no one was playing football as a turning point, I think that was a true turning point, because immediately afterwards, they draw 2-2 against Emery's Arsenal. They should have won that game. It was only a 96th minute Lacazette goal that spared Arsenal's blushes, and then they went on the run that took them into relative mid-table obscurity.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, I want to come back to that, but first, Alex, can I ask you, Carl is referring there to some long-term problems that the 9-0 exposed in full, I suppose. What were they?
That's a big question. The
Talk
first
for 1 minute and then stop.
Oh, right, okay.
No, I'm just joking. Go on.
I know you're joking. The first thing I'd say is that I was at the Everton game that Carl refers to, and not just is it one of the worst games of football I've ever watched, but I think Cedric's performance at left wing back is possibly the single worst performance of a Premier League player I've ever seen. It was remarkable. I still have my scarf, actually.
I was going to say, did you put it over your eyes?
No, I didn't. Hassenhüttl, when he came in to save Southampton from relegation last season, he brought with him quite a clear and defined philosophy. Unfortunately, it's not a philosophy that is particularly easy to instill into a playing squad. And we've seen this with people who advocate high pressing and gegenpressing, making the transition to English football and not immediately being able to get the squad to do what they want them to do. Hassenhüttl did save Southampton, and there definitely did appear to be a solidifying of their playing philosophy, but I think at the beginning of this season, there were certain issues, particularly around centre-back. Obviously, if you're playing a high-pressing game and you're relying on the full-backs to push forwards and squeeze in the wide spaces and try and affect turnovers, you need your centre-backs to be really, really good at one-on-one defending. And although Jack Stevens has kind of grown in stature as the season has progressed, that was not a strength of his particularly, and that's been an area of weakness. I think as well, Højbjerg, who's arguably one of the 2 or 3 most talented players in the squad, was sort of caught slightly between defensive responsibilities and a natural inclination to be the playmaker, which again meant that the high pressing system was slightly unbalanced. And as Carl says, when a defensive rejig is required because a player's been sent off, and Bertrand is one of those really, really intelligent players who is able to make a pressing system work, all of a sudden that exposes the inability to defend one-on-one. Now, Southampton also have a long-standing issue with the deficit between chance creation and scoring. That's something they've actually improved on a little bit, but I think that's a kind of a hangover. This is a thing that has been the case for 4 or 5 seasons, where Southampton actually create chances at a league average or above league average rate, but fail to convert them. And what that does is it creates a situation in which a team is not playing with a great degree of confidence, because, you know, if you're creating a lot but you don't have the strikers to finish it, then obviously heads will drop, and that puts you in a difficult position, especially if you're defensively slightly unbalanced. So I think that game kind of mostly highlighted the defensive issues, but it was a possibility because Southampton were already a team flagging in confidence because of this long-standing inability to score goals.
I mean, can I ask you about Hassenhüttl as well, just briefly? Because I remember you and I discussing this when he first arrived at Southampton. We were really excited about it, right? And I'm thinking now as you're talking, am I right in remembering that it took Jurgen Klopp a while at Liverpool to really institute that pressing system and get his players familiar with it to the extent where they are as successful and, you know, second degree as they are now? Yeah,
that's certainly true. I mean, I was very excited, and I think, you know, there were elements of that squad that were certainly well geared towards the kind of 4-2-2-2 system that Hassenhüttl had used at Leipzig, which is the kind of Leipzig blueprint, that the narrow 4-4-2 with the wide players tucking inside to create a second line of attacking midfielders. And you've got forwards like Shane Long, who are really good at running the channels and very, very good at pressing. So, you know, there were reasons to see why Hassenhüttl plus elements of the Southampton squad were a really good fit. Central defence was not really one of those, which is, of course, the foundation of any team's defensive structure. But I also think that, you know, there's a complexity to what he's trying to do, both in terms of the pressing, but also in terms of the technical aspects that then come into that. And, you know, I was looking at some stats earlier, and Southampton are the worst team in the Premier League for losing possession and turning it over. They are the best team in the Premier League for PPDA, the measure of pressing. So, you know, they're doing some things right and they're getting there in some regards, but there are still technical deficiencies that mean that when they try and play this really, really high-paced, high-pressing, high-energy, dynamic kind of game, which has been Hassenhüttl's kind of blueprint, even going as far back as when he was at Ingolstadt, there's a slight technical deficit in the quality of some of those players being able to reach that level.
Yeah, okay. Well, regarding the blueprint, Carl, Højbjerg is a player who is crucial to the side, and his contribution is great to that style of playing. His contract runs out in June 2021. I mean, what's the latest on that? And if he were to leave, what would be the potential repercussions of his departure?
It's been a very interesting situation with Højbjerg. So at the start of the season, I want to say after the first game against Burnley, Southampton did a fan forum where Højbjerg was among a panel with Ralph Hasenhuttl, Managing Director Toby Steele, and Chief Executive Martin Semmens. And I think around about the halfway point, a very nice Southampton fan essentially asked Højbjerg, when are you signing a contract? When are you signing a new contract? Because we signed it, you know, Nathan Redmond did one. Huge round of applause. One of those sort of bits of laughter from Højbjerg.
Yeah.
And he gave a very eloquent answer of basically, I understand why there's some reluctance about this, but don't worry, I'm absolutely committed to this club. I want great things from this club. It then quickly swung to Martin Semmens, and Semmens said Højbjerg has privately informed the club what he wants to do, and the club has 2 or 3 things they want to they have to do, a sort of checklist of items they want crossed off, and Højbjerg is on that checklist. So it was that sort of non-committal, don't worry, but I love this club, and then the boss saying, we've got a number of things to do, but don't worry about Højbjerg. Since then, there's been a lot of talk from Hasenhuttl in particular around like January, where there was quite a lot of conversation around Shane Long's contract, or Shane Long is a free agent this summer right. 2020. And the conversation was simply, what are you doing in regards to contract negotiations? And Hasenhuttl said, no one is getting offered a new contract until Southampton reach 36 points, which is Hasenhutl's version of the magical 40, because he is continental. Only 36 makes more sense.
What are you on, 34 right now?
They're on 34 right now.
Oh, wow.
So to peek to peek behind the curtain a bit, on 3 occasions I've written an article of Southampton have finally reached 36 points. Here's what happens next. But Southampton haven't won those games, so I've had to write other articles. So that was the plan. And obviously, since then, we saw on the last day of the January transfer window, when I was more or less mid-question with Ralph Hasenhuttl, when our phones went off with Sky Sports notifications linking Højbjerg to Tottenham Hotspur, to which we sort of cut my question off, and then halfway through went, what's going on here with Højbjerg? And Hasenhuttl said there's absolutely no chance of Højbjerg leaving. Since then, the links between Højbjerg and Tottenham Hotspur have grown stronger. Højbjerg himself has changed agent from his previous long-term one to Pini Zavi, who is the former agent of Carlos Tevez. He's called a super agent in websites that use the term super agent with air quotes.
But hey, who isn't a super agent these days?
Who isn't, truly? So we know he's changed agent. We know he's been linked to Tottenham Hotspur. We know for a fact that Carlo Ancelotti is a fan, and we also know that Everton consider central midfield as an area they'd like to strengthen. However, Højbjerg himself has he's made some interesting moves on social media in the last 3 or 4 months. So he joined Twitter in the new year. He was on Instagram when Southampton wished him a congratulations on 100 appearances for Southampton. He said, here's to 100 more appearances for Southampton. But as we record this, so we're recording this on this Friday morning, there was an article from a statistics website praising his aptitude in a certain attribute and saying that this is why Tottenham Hotspur like him. And I know Højbjerg's liked that tweet. So.
Right.
Oops.
What is that? What is that aptitude? What is that specific thing that he's doing?
Ball wins. He is incredibly good at ball recoveries. So Højbjerg, it's quite fun when you have to remember Højbjerg spent most of his footballing education under Pep Guardiola at Bayern Munich. So sort of was long sought after and thought of as the next big thing in Danish football. Goes to FC Copenhagen, signs for Bayern Munich under Jupp Heynckes. So Jupp Heynckes' final season. And then basically Pep Guardiola comes in and goes, who's this precocious young teenager? And goes, oh, you're pretty good with your technical ability on the ball and your knee over the ball short passing. I can find a use for you. Played him 2 or 3 times, loaned him out a couple of times, but that education, that sort of Pep Guardiola, take the ball, pass the ball, has very much runs through to this very day. So Højbjerg is incredibly good at ball wins. I think he leads per 90. I'm going to make sure I get that statistic up right now. So the interesting thing is obviously, basic stat line, he's got 5 goals and 6 assists in 100 or so appearances for Southampton, which wouldn't indicate someone worth 20 to 35 million and possibly playing Champions League football. But in terms of, he leads the Premier League this season for ball recoveries per 90, so he makes 10.5 for minutes played. He also, in terms of starting passing movements, is one of the better central midfielders at that. So what he very, very often does is basically he will win the ball at very high up the pitch as possible, make the simple pass, and then that will begin the passing sequence. One of the notable things about Højbjerg when he's on the pitch is the fact that he very often makes a pass and then will flash his hands with like a wait gesture to teammates. Or simply calm down, I've won the ball, get back into position, and wait, because now we're going to be able to start our period of play. Bear in mind, he's only 24 years of age, which I think makes him the youngest Premier League captain as well. So a very good footballing IQ, very good emotional intelligence, from what I understand.
So a tragedy if he leaves then?
You would think there are replaceable figures. So when you look at ball recoveries per 90, there are players like Jefferson Lerma, Declan Rice, Danny Ceballos, Kovacic. So players slightly above Southampton in the table, but also in Jefferson Lerma, someone at Bournemouth. You can find players of similar profiles there that can just do that very simple, I'm going to win the ball back and make this simple sideways pass. Also, if Southampton wanted to spend a bit more money, you could probably buy someone that did a bit more. But knowing not from what Southampton appear to have in terms of finances for transfers, if Højbjerg left, it would be damaging.
I think that's a crucial point as well, that Højbjerg he's a multi-dimensional midfielder, and if you read Pep Confidential, it's very, very clear that Guardiola rated him extremely highly, saw him in some regards almost as kind of an heir apparent to Philippe Lahm in the pivot position for Bayern Munich. And so there was something of a surprise when he turned up at Southampton, because there was a sense of, this guy was supposed to be the next big thing, and here he is now playing for, fairly well established at that point Premier League side, but still quite a provincial one without a great deal of a chance of trophies, and I say that as a Southampton supporter. And I think the issue that you have with Southampton and the way that they play under Hassenhüttl is you need a blend in the squad of players who are athletically capable of fulfilling the pressing orders, people like a Shane Long, for example, or a Moussa Djempo. But you also need to have a couple of organisers. You need a couple of players who are not just able to do what's required of them in terms of ball recoveries and starting passing movements, and arguably James Ward-Prowse is as influential as Højbjerg in terms of what he does creatively. But you absolutely need to have some of these players who are the brains of the coach, but on the pitch during 90 minutes. And Southampton are a side who've never really, since, going back possibly to the days of people like Svensson and Lundekvam, had really, really significant on-pitch leadership. Stephen Davis was...
Did you know what? From an outsider's perspective, James Ward-Prowse is is the Southampton emblematic player who is also presumably, a leading or senior figure on the pitch. And not to say that he doesn't have a presence, but, he's mostly discussed for his set-piece ability, right? You don't really see him often imprinting on a game in the way that you're describing, Alex.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think that one of the issues that Southampton have is that they are a bit nice. I agree with Carl in the sense that if you're looking to replace ball winning, then there are certain types of players that would fit into that. And actually, yes, as a Southampton fan, I would hate to see Højbjerg leave, because I genuinely believe he's an excellent player. But if you want a player to come in and impose themselves physically on a game, leave the footballing IQ thing aside for a moment, then actually someone like a Philip Billing or a Jefferson Lerma, somebody who can, be physical. I'm not saying, go out and kick people. That's reductive and stupid. But actually, there isn't anybody, and again, this is a 9-0 thing. There isn't anybody really who is a proper leader on the pitch in that regard. I think you have players like Bertrand and Højbjerg, who are clearly very, very intelligent footballers and probably very intelligent people. You have incredibly hard-working players like Danny Ings, Shane Long, and you have players that are capable of inspiring others with moments of brilliance like Djempo or Sofiane Boufal. What you don't really have is a player who kind of shouts and screams and gets stuff done. And Højbjerg's gesturing to his teammates is sort of the closest you get to that form of leadership. And although Hassenhüttl is very Kloppian in his kind of, he's tall, he's big, he is very gestural, he's very loud and demonstrative, there isn't an equivalent of someone like a Van Dijk or a Henderson on the pitch for Southampton that can transmute that among the players at the same time. And maybe swapping Højbjerg for somebody who is more like that would not be the worst thing.
I believe you're referring to the spine. That's what the layman calls it, isn't it, Alex?
I'm not a layman, I wouldn't know.
Oh, come off it. Go on,
Can I
Carl.
make a little point
up for
about the comparisons between Klopp and Hasenhuttl? So obviously, when Hasenhuttl they did the same coaching course. Hasenhuttl has been referred to as the Klopp of the Alpines, or of the Alps, or the Alpine Klopp. Hasenhuttl doesn't particularly like that terminology.
It makes him sound like a tasty cereal, doesn't it?
It really does. The Alpine Klopp.
Delicious.
But one thing I found really surprising for a large part of this season, and I think one distinct difference between the two, and one reason why I think Klopp is a great manager, and why Hasenhuttl is potentially still feeling himself out and possibly won't be managing the Champions League for a little bit longer, is the fact that Hasenhuttl is meaner than Klopp, if that makes sense.
Right.
So obviously Klopp, yes, it can be very demonstrative and very much, talks about the need to press and talks about intensity, but also, Klopp very much has this sort of affable, hugging, boom, nappy lad, how you doing stuff. Whereas what's been very telling for this season of Southampton is that Ralph Hasenhuttl wants his team to play a highly robust, high-pressing style of football that requires hard running and tackling all over the pitch, and by the end of it, you're running 10 kilometers and you're exhausted, and you've possibly only beaten someone via a set piece. But Hasenhuttl himself doesn't seem too tactile. He doesn't. There have been 2 or 3 times where he's talked about pressure and goes, "Yeah, we know there's pressure. I need to tell players that they need to get on with it." There's been quite a few talks about how he doesn't need to put an arm around a player because they know what their job and they know what they need to do, which I've found quite concerning. When you look at some of the players that haven't had the best runs of form at Southampton, there have been very few players that have had a bad run of form and then sort of kicked on at a good run of form outside of that second international break collective sort of together as a team we're going to do better. There are 2 or 3 Southampton figures who just sort of seem surplus to requirements. So Shea Adams obviously signed for what is a large amount of money for Southampton, 15 million. Didn't have the best start, did everything that you could do but score a goal. Whereas now you ask Hasenhuttl how Shea Adams getting on, and the conversation very much seems like I don't need to tell him what to do. He needs to know what to do, which I can't imagine Jurgen Klopp saying that about Origi, for example.
Right, yeah.
And I think, I think that this is very apparent in a lot of managers that talk about philosophy, which is a word that I really would like not used in football anymore because it's just a fancy word for tactical output view. But anyone that comes in with a very,
Is it though, Carl? I feel offended by that. I feel personally offended by that.
Philosophy is for university students. It's just tactics, mate. It's just tactics. It's just the way.
Is
you
it
want to
though,
play
or what if? And I know I'm taking a tangent away from the discussion here, but put it this way: can a philosophy not include on-pitch tactics as well as other means and themes by which you like to run the club?
Every football club wants to play attacking football with academy-bred youngsters that wins trophies. That's not philosophy. That's just what everyone thinks.
I mean, when you put it like that, it is kind of true. That actually brings me on to something I was going to ask you, Carl. In terms of this stylistic point you make around a kind of an abrasiveness that Hassenhüttl has, how does that dovetail in with the introduction of young players? I mean, obviously, Jan Valery was trusted towards the beginning of the season. Will Smallburn's come in? Obafemi's played when he's been fit, although unfortunately he has had injury issues. But presumably, if you're looking to encourage younger players, that abrasive style isn't necessarily the most effective, or maybe he's trying to find the ones that respond to it.
I think it's a little bit of the latter. I think what's been quite notable is in the 11, 12 weeks that we've had during lockdown, Hasenhuttl has spent most of lockdown in Munich with his family, and he's created what Southampton are now terming as an iBook, which is for the academy. So one particularly interesting about Southampton's academy is there's just a dearth of former Premier League players. There's Kelvin Davis, and that's it. in terms of people with Premier League experience in Southampton's academy right now as we're speaking. So Radi Jahidi was the only other former Southampton professional, but he played with them in League One and the Championship. So in terms of the knowledge and nous of former pros, the versus academic coaches, shall we say, or youth coaches, the balance is, or the ratio of coaches is incredibly different to clubs of a similar ilk. So you bear in mind, if you look at similar clubs like Crystal Palace, like Bournemouth, like Leicester City, for example, they have a number of former professionals, or a bit lower in the pyramid. Derby County, for example, or Leeds, they'll try and have a number of ex-pros just to teach the subtle nuances to academy players of what being a professional football is like. So it's sort of, here's what time you sleep when you're in an away game. Here's the sort of hotel rooms you want to avoid when you're in an away game. This is what, here's how early you wear your brand new pair of football boots so you don't get blisters on the big game. Just those tiny, almost, I don't want to say imperceptible, but those tiny things that you wouldn't consider if you only learned how to coach football from being a coach. Those aren't there from Southampton. So I think this iBook that Hassel's been working on is trying to include knowledge like this, and it's going out for all these coaches as well. Hassel has said 2 or 3 particularly interesting things involving Smallbone. He knew he wanted to play Smallbone from the start of the season, but had to wait until towards the end because he needed to work on Smallbone's off the ball workings and efforts. So Hassel, he wants to play this high pressing system. It's very important that Southampton players work against the ball. So when Southampton's game begins and lives and dies by what they do when they're out of possession, whereas their academy is taught, let's play passing football. And I think that discord has is causing these sort of bizarre teething problems to Southampton's season.
Oh, that's very interesting. Can I ask you something similar about recruitment as well, Carl? Because Ross Wilson, who was in charge of recruitment before, left in October 2019 to take up a position at Rangers, incidentally. Seb has left me a little question here in brackets. What does that say? And brackets. Also, who's currently in charge? What does the department's shape look like?
So in terms of recruitment, Matt Crocker, former head of Southampton's academy from 2000, not former head of Southampton's academy, a key part of Southampton's academy from around about 2003 to 2006, has returned and he now has Ross Wilson's job title, so head of footballing operations, but his job spec is a lot closer to that of Les Reed. So he has more or less top to bottom purview of the club from first team down to the academy. I also think he has input on the women's team as well. So he's in charge there. He joined in January. Bear in mind, he was very successful at Southampton's academy during the time where the likes of Adam Lallana and Oxlade-Chamberlain were coming through. He left, joined the English FA, was a key part of the England DNA system that saw all of that success at youth level and
all those hexagons
and that bizarre sort of time where Philip Neville was wearing a waistcoat because Gareth Southgate wore a waistcoat. So sort of did that and is now back at Southampton. Curiously, it appeared, I think David Ornstein revealed that Mr. Crocker essentially set up his own interview. So when Russ Wilson left, he sort of called up Southampton and went, do you want a replacement? Because I will do this job for you. Let's have an interview for this job at this date.
Wow.
So he's going through quite a lot.
At my house.
Yeah, pretty much. So he's there. He's working quite closely with Ralph Hasenhuttl. So there's it's those two as a sort of central footballing pivot, and they constantly feed into Martin Semmens, chief executive, who then feeds into the owners, the chairman Gao Jingsen and Katharina Liebner.
Right. Yeah.
So there is sort of a central governance board at Southampton, which is Martin Semmens, Matt Crocker, Ralph Hasenhuttl, Toby Steele, and I believe they sort of take care of the day-to-day running of Southampton Football Club. But then from there, Martin Semmens then talks to Gao and Katerina about who pays for it, shall we say.
Right, yeah. I mean, because from an outsider's perspective, and I think that's the second time I've said that, but I'm very much an outsider. I really I chime with what you said early on, Carl. I didn't really pay that much attention to what was happening with Southampton, and then I was surprised to find that they were, hovering towards the bottom of the league, losing a game 9-0. My memory of Southampton is very much of that Lallana and Ricky Lambert generation, when they had all of these very young, exciting players, when James Ward-Prowse was still young and exciting. Now he's just he's exciting rather than young. I don't think I didn't really pay that much attention to them for a few years. But at the time, that club, the themes of that club, or the sort of keywords that you would attach to that club as a non-Southampton supporter, were things like excellent recruitment, excellent academy. They bring through all of these incredible young players. Liverpool buy all of their players. These were the general themes. And that appears to have sort of disappeared a little bit, which is why I asked the question about recruitment. And that ties into something that is true of Hassenhüttl as well, that his success at Leipzig, depended in part on the strength of Red Bull's network and their recruitment. So I just wondered what efforts are being made now to equip him with the same tools. You kind of already answered the question, but do you think with the new people in place, with the new structure in place, that might be an aspect of Southampton that we can revisit?
I hope so. So I think the same thing happens to every medium-sized club that gets some form of on-field or off-field advantage. Basically, Stoke got really good at long throw-ins, and then everyone figured out how to defend against it. And then Stoke weren't good at long throw-ins anymore, or Stoke were very good at rugged football play, and then they stopped being good at rugged football, and everyone caught up. Eventually, if you're a mid-sized Premier League club and you have an advantage, or you are good at something, you either fail to capitalise it or diversify, or everyone catches up with you. And I think what happened to Southampton... Or
people take your stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think what happened with Southampton was they were really good over a spell of time at bringing recruitment and doing really, really well. And yes, you can talk about how they brought in Sadio Mane, they had Dusan Tadic, they had Virgil van Dijk. I think very recently it came out that Virgil van Dijk went, I had other offers, but I chose Southampton because they had Ronald Koeman.
Well, I think back to Gareth Bale and Theo Walcott, through the academy too.
Yeah, which again, so the two key people there, Hugh Jennings and Malcolm Elias, are now at Fulham. Right. And it's that sort of people leave, people change. The academy, I think Southampton's academy, they don't particularly pay agents' fees to get players to join their academy, which is one of those things that is very nice in a sporting sense.
Ajax make it look so easy.
But unfortunately, other Premier League clubs do. So sometimes they get snubbed. They get snubbed for instead of other clubs. There was also they got weird in that way of sort of, if I say it doesn't sound too intelligent, but if you've got a professional football player to explain it, you can get a bit too esoteric with your transfer signings. Right. When one of your calling cards is we're going to sign underrated prospects from niche markets. In 2015, an underrated player from a niche market is N'Golo Kante because he's playing in the second tier in France. In 2018, an underrated player in a niche market is sort of the 13th best player in the Norwegian league. You can get too esoteric. You can get too into the
I tell
stats.
Alex this all the time. He doesn't listen.
Do you know what? I feel like this, and also the philosophy comments. I'm coming.
He's come here just to specifically dig at us. That's what he's done.
But he's doing it in such a kind of genteel way. It's really hard to rear up
confusing.
about it.
It is confusing, isn't it? I feel angry and happy.
I think Southampton's recruitment will get better because now they've got Crocker and they've got Hassenhüttl, who just has a bit more footballing nous and very much has that sort of very clear idea of how he wants to play. So he has apparently a 10 commandments list of I want a player with the following criteria. So sort of you can imagine a football manager list, under the age of 24, 2 years left on contract, at least 15% acceleration or something or other like that. And I think they're trying to buy players like that. But I think another problem with Southampton is how much money they have to spend. Because a number that keeps coming up a lot with Southampton's recruitment is apparently they only really want to ever spend 15 million on a football player, which in today's market before the COVID-19 suspension of football doesn't get you too much. And now I have absolutely no idea.
I don't think anyone does.
In terms of a lot of what you've said, Carl, there's a really strong, and I remember this from the period when Southampton were kind of really doing badly towards the beginning of the season, and The message, as I understood it from the club, was we would rather sack all of the players than sack the manager. And, you know, when you've got this disparity between the way the academy is teaching players that is different from what the first team wants, and so the academy is being changed, recruitment, all of this points very much towards Southampton pinning their hopes on either retaining Hassenhüttl for a significant period of time, or at the very least being able to find some sort of clone of him should he choose to depart for somewhere else. That to me feels like quite a lot of a gamble. It's not a gamble I necessarily disagree with, but they're putting an awful lot of faith in one person's ability to be transformational.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, to bring up the Klopp analogy again, if you Klopp is, I want to say he's five years into his spell at Liverpool now.
I'm going to look that up as you talk.
2015. I feel as if he came in at 2015.
I think that's right.
Maybe it's 7. Sort of.
It's 5.
Yeah, Liverpool 5 years into their tenureship on the Jurgen Klopp. Obviously, I think there is that sort of similarity for Hassel's first 6 months and Jurgen Klopp's first half season, where they were trying to play this robust style of pressing football. They couldn't quite get there because they didn't have the personnel. And I think Southampton are going in for the sort of, if we can get Hasenhuttl for 5 years, this can lay a bedrock that should last us for the next decade or so.
How long has he been there now, Carl?
He's managed 60 games.
Okay.
So he replaced Mark Hughes on December 2018 after Mark Hughes failed to beat Jose Mourinho's Manchester United, and Mourinho called Paul Pogba a virus.
Okay, that was that momentous day. God, I just forgot Mark Hughes even existed, you know?
That is not a good manager anymore.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because Mark Hughes, for people of a certain age, i.e. my age, has completely sullied his memory as an excellent footballer by being such a mediocre football manager that he disappears from my brain.
There was a wonderful piece on StatsBomb when they first started doing sort of managerial profiles, and they worked out that at the time, so I think this was 2013, they worked out at the time, basically Mark Hughes, regardless of what Premier League club he was at, gets you the same amount of results, gets you the same amount of shots on goal, the same amount of goals conceded, and the same output. So Mark Hughes,
consistent.
Yeah, which is the thing. That makes you a good Blackburn manager. That makes you a bad Manchester City manager, and that makes you a awkward Fulham one. And then that was in 2013, and I think his methods just became less effective over time. So, Mark Hughes, a man who he very nearly managed to get 2 teams relegated in the same season.
A stat for the ages. Hey, is the club for sale?
Listen, pay very, very close attention to my voice. Maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
So, Southampton for sale in the same way that nearly every Premier League club outside of the top 6 are for sale. In that there is a number. There's
always a number, isn't there?
There's a number, and if someone comes in and offers that number, the club will sell it up.
Is it £200 million, as the Independent said in 2019?
So that's particularly interesting. So the Independent said that in 2019, and I think a bit earlier they said it was 250 million. Whereas I think what that is a very smart equation for clubs outside the top 6. So you bear in mind any club outside the top 6, you are taking home around about 2 million per home game, just to stadium attendance and whatnot. So I think so outside the top 6 and outside, I want to say Newcastle. So Newcastle, because of the size of St James's Park, can probably charge a bit more. Timely information for that, but I think every club outside the top 6, Newcastle, and then maybe West Ham, because of the London location, are operating in that 200 million to 250 million ballpark. You look at sales of similar size football clubs. So I think West Bromwich Albion was sold for 200 million. And I want to believe Swansea was sold for 200 million. Obviously, now if Swansea was sold, it would be considerably cheaper because they're now in the Championship. But I think every Premier League club between 7th and 20th, if you had 200 million and wished to buy a football club, you could start a very serious conversation.
Yeah, see, that's interesting, actually, because it turns out this Independent article says that the £200 million valuation was just for Zhao's 80% stake. So I guess that would value the club at 250. But hey, that fits within the theory.
Yes. So, I mean, it's. I think the question of are Southampton for sale? Let me say that again. Are Southampton for sale is one of those one sentence questions that needs a paragraph of explanation, because you need to go into the current owners of Southampton Football Club, who they are, why they bought Southampton Football Club, and what they have done in the years since they've owned Southampton Football Club, and also go into what sort of assets Southampton have. So Southampton have, it's a captive market to a degree. Sort of, it's a one city club. They've got an okay 32,000 seater stadium, and they've got a tier 1 academy. And
Alex Stewart is a fan.
And Alex Stewart's a fan. So these are good reasons to spend 250 million. However, there are also reasons why you wouldn't want to spend more than 300 million.
Right.
So
talk to me about the current owners, though. That interests me, because Tifo did a video on Zhao Jisheng when he bought Southampton a few years ago. To the best of your knowledge, what are his intentions with the club? Why did he buy the club? Why does his daughter sit on the board? What does he want to do with the club?
That is still incredibly hard to pass. So Zhao Jisheng speaks around about 200 words of English.
Which ones?
We march on.
Right. Yeah. Good. Nice.
That was his last statement given to Southampton fans on I think it was at the end of a fan forum. He just sort of he appeared via what we now call a Zoom call, and just said, "Hello, Southampton fans, we march on." His purchase of the club seemed to be part of a large amount of Chinese investment in European football, and it very much seemed to be the very last purchase made. Because obviously, his purchase of Southampton Football Club saw redrafting of the fit and proper rules.
Yes, it did,
for ownership, which again is one of those sort of, if he tried to buy Southampton again, he wouldn't be able to, due to a number of financial discrepancies he had in his native homeland. The most memorable interview he's given since owning Southampton was to the Financial Times, where he said, he doesn't want Southampton to be a pig to be fattened, to be sold, and he is now Southampton's father, and he wants to make the club self-sufficient. These are all qualified, noble tasks. As some Southampton fans have expressed to me, if you did a league table of bad club owners, Gao's approach of buying you and then spending absolutely no money ranks him as sort of a chaotic neutral. But you would, for a club of Southampton's size and a club of Southampton's potential, especially with the academy, you would think that a owner with a little bit more ambition could get a Southampton from a team that has battled relegation for 3 or 4 seasons to a club that could possibly be troubling the Europa League spaces. At the moment, what you have is just an owner who bought the club for reasons that we think might be politically motivated in China, and for reasons that we still cannot properly explain, because this gentleman doesn't really talk about the club or is really seen at Southampton outside of the 2 or 3 occasions Southampton play Liverpool or Manchester United. And it's that sort of odd case of Chinese investment in football that doesn't quite seem to make sense to Westerners, because we inherently have a different view of sport. Yeah.
Hey, do you know, we made a video with Simon Chadwick all about the value of port cities. I don't think it was actually about that, but that featured as part of the video. That would be dry, wouldn't it? But Southampton were part of that, obviously as a feature of international Chinese investment into a club, and it's all about the fact that Southampton is a large port city, or I think one of the biggest port cities in the UK in terms of the amount of goods coming in and leaving via the port there. So it's a real trading hub. And also it talked about there's been a lot of Chinese investment in football clubs around the Birmingham area as well, around the West Midlands. The suggestion there was because that was potentially related to the HS2 project. I don't know, that all conspiracy muck to you? What do you think, Carl?
I very much enjoyed that video, and it very much made sense in terms of We know for a fact there's a number of large amounts of Chinese money in foreign infrastructure. This is something that's been a trend worldwide, not just in football and not just in England, but in everywhere. So, as I record this, I have Ghanaian parents. I'm from Ghana. There's large amounts of Chinese investment in Ghanaian infrastructure.
I will build that bridge.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is something that happens quite often. So, if a high speed rail or HS2 is played into why Gal bought Southampton. That certainly seems to make more sense than what I've heard, where Gal will simply, that's got a great academy, I'm going to buy that and then build a Southampton hotel in China. Because this is one of those very strange things that keeps happening when there is Chinese investment in football clubs, where they're sort of, we're going to buy part of this club and then build a hotel branded with this club back home. So again,
I know the country is huge, but it must be so big to accommodate all of these, Real Madrid World, Southampton Hotel. Where? I feel like, did you ever watch that episode of South Park where they go to Imagination Land? Yeah. I feel like if there must be a world somewhere, Imagination Land, where all of these weird football replica restaurants and theme parks and hotels are.
It's true. Like Planet Hollywood, the restaurant. That had that stopped being a destination dining event in around about the mid-90s. So I have no idea how any of these football clubs have any of these hotels, and I don't think any of them have got off the ground really. Sort of the 1 billion planned Real Madrid one hasn't done anything, if Manchester United couldn't get a hotel in their name in China, then I very much have questions over Southampton's ability to create one. Sorry, Alex.
Do you know what? Actually, I was just going to say that if you're listening to this on the day of release tomorrow, I believe we put out a video. It's called something like Real Madrid World. It's an adaptation of Dermot Corrigan's piece that was released on The Athletic recently, all about this artificial island off the coast of the Gulf somewhere. That was supposed to be a Real Madrid themed theme park. Some of the concept art for this place is amazing, though. Like they had this stadium, which was the first ever open to the sea stadium, where there was half of it was missing, like the long half, and fans who would sit in the stands on the other side would watch the football and then look out over that to the sea, which I think is a lovely idea. Shame it never came to pass. It's not really a question, is it? Just threw it out there.
It's just very strange forms of investment, sort of. Everyone comes with hype and bluster. Oh, we've got brand new owners that they come from a place far away and they're going to do this and they're going to do this back home. Which, I think we saw this to a slightly lesser degree with Aston Villa and some longer-term problems with Aston Villa. Where basically Dr. Tony Gia wasn't quite who he claimed to be. Not to say that this is going to repeat itself at Southampton, but there is a lack of proper scrutiny in terms of foreign investment in football that we could all serve to get a bit better at. If someone's coming to buy your club and saying, I'm going to set up a hotel in China, let's really look at that. What do the staff wear, for starters?
Right, listen, we've wondered. I'm going to bring you back before we finish to say that Southampton, in fact, I should probably ask Alex this because he hasn't spoken for 25 minutes now. Are you alive, Alex?
Yeah, I'm still here, yeah.
There you go. I've got one for you, pal.
Go on.
Southampton have some very difficult remaining fixtures. I'm going to read them aloud now. Arsenal, Watford, City, Everton, I nearly said Southampton. No, that's wrong. Manchester United, Sheffield. You get the idea. There's also a Norwich and a Bournemouth and a Brighton in there, so some relegation scraps too. 34 points. Are you safe?
Should be, yes. I think. Look, we're existing in a world where football is going to restart, and who knows how players will be affected by various things. We've seen some stuff from the Bundesliga that indicates certain changes, certain issues that have come out, particularly around muscle injuries and so on. So it's all very unknown. There is one point I would make about Southampton, and I know Carl loves to parse the XG. So Southampton are currently going off Opta's numbers, the second worst performing side for conceding more than they should have by expected goals against, and they're the third worst side for scoring compared to expected goals, not including penalties. So there is definite room for improvement there. They're basically that kind of magical combination of being really, you can say unlucky, I suppose. They're unlucky at both ends. And perhaps the restart, some additional time, that may benefit them. I would also say, however, that Hassenhüttl's style is probably least suited to coming back after a significant break where there's an issue around muscle injuries. So that doesn't particularly fill me with confidence. I do think we'll be fine, but I think it could be dicey.
Okay. Carl, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think Saints fans, or indeed non-Saints fans listening, should know about with Southampton, or have we pretty much covered it?
I do want to get into. I want to be just quite cheery about Danny Ings. Danny Ings' fantastic season.
Yeah, good idea. Go ahead.
So, I mean, what a season that was! 15 goals, on the hotter than fish grease, on a scoring run that I think. Conceivably, if Euro 2020 had gone ahead and we weren't in this COVID-related suspension of football, I very much think Danny Ings would have played himself into the Euro 2020 squad for England.
Do you think so?
Absolutely. I think such was Ings' form and such is the way that Danny Ings likes to play football, I believe he has very good argument to putting to bed any discussion of Jamie Vardy coming back out of international retirement. I think the way Ings likes to play in his sort of running the channels, automatic shooting with that bow-legged sprint where he presses high up the pitch, quite similar to Vardy. Bear in mind, Ings is a lot younger than Vardy, and Vardy, if Vardy wishes to remain international entire in the case of emergency, I think Ings' form, if he can sustain it, can put to bed that emergency. Another thing I'm really interested to see for when Southampton comes back to playing football is their discipline record. So Southampton, because of their high pressing football, and because of the way the robust style they want to play football, they tactically foul. They're not that sort of team, but they are that sort of team. And I think this is very well emblemised by James Ward-Prowse. You would not think James Ward-Prowse is a snide because he's got a double barrel surname, a very nice haircut, and he doesn't have any tattoos. But if
that
you ask,
RAF haircut, isn't it? It's like a 1940s thing. Claude Puel described them as someone who'd be a very good son-in-law. And I think that sort of behaviour allows Southampton to play. What they tend to do is they play right up into the line of acceptability. And then when a referee says you're going to get yellow carded, they tend to fall back. But that said, they do also, they're tied number one for red cards in the Premier League. They've got 3 red cards. And it's that sort of, a lot of Southampton's game is very robust and it requires a lot of fail checks for this side of football. So Hassel wants his team to play very, very high up the pitch, but also he doesn't have the correct personnel for it. So he uses Shane Long, who isn't the most prolific striker, fail safe, sort of a emergency safe thing. The team wants to play high up the pitch, but he hasn't got the 2 fastest centre backs, so they sort of sit in a mid block. When they're out of possession, sort of, okay, we'll just do this to bypass that. And they also have this thing of, if you can somehow get past our 3 filters, they'll foul you, which when it works is good. When it doesn't work, they get red carded, and they're not very good at all when they go down to 10 men. So, yeah. But tell you what, I think Danny Ings is a fantastic and exciting player, and also that's the most impressed I've ever been by Claude Puel. Hearing that, as a man who've made little impression on me before, I feel like that's a real good dig. Someone would make a good son-in-law. It sounds to me like they're suggesting that they have no edge. You know what I'm saying? They're a little too safe. No good. Hey, Carl, thanks so much for joining us today. Very enjoyable to spend some time with you.
It's been a pleasure. I'm sorry if I rambled a bit too much.
No. That's what a podcast is for. And Alex, thank you also for being here, but you're here every week, so I'm less grateful to you.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah, okay. We'll be back next week with, I don't know what it is, but it's coming. Thanks very much, and goodbye. Alex, don't turn your thing off yet. We've got to do a thing.